Good afternoon and welcome to the Liverpool Literary Festival and this very exciting event with Jane Unsworth, who is going to be talking about the move from fiction to non-fiction, among other things. We've got a little bit of housekeeping before we crack on. So following the event, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. If you are joining us via Zoom, please submit your questions using the Q&A function. And if you're watching us through Facebook Live, please use the comments box for the same purpose. A selection of audience questions will then be put to our guests. And don't forget that all of our events are being recorded, so please do check back to the Liverpool Literary Festival Facebook page to catch up on any action that you've been unable to attend live, or to simply enjoy the whole programme again at the time of your choosing. So my name's Danny O'Connor. I'm a lecturer in creative writing and 20th century fiction at the University of Liverpool here in the English department, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Jane Unsworth, who is the author of fiction, screenplays, and now non-fiction. Her debut novel, Hungry, the Stars and Everything, won a Betty Trask Award from the Society of Authors. Animals, which maps the intensity of close friendships, was turned into a film that premiered at the Sundance Festival, and for which Emma wrote the screenplay. Her most recent novel, Adults, a Sunday Times bestseller, is an account of one woman's struggle with social media addiction and is being described as hilarious by Dolly Alderton, tender by Jessie Burton, and dazzling by Marion Keyes. Emma's most recent work, After the Storm, published by Profile Books and the Wellcome Collection, and follows her own experience of postnatal depression. And I should add that Emma is also a graduate of the English department here at the University of Liverpool. So without further ado, I'll be delighted to welcome Jane Unsworth.
Hi, Danny. Thank you for the introduction.
At least I can do. So obviously we're talking today about your move from fiction to non-fiction, which is, I think, is quite a striking move in many ways, but I think there are some ways it's kind of precipitated by some of the things that you do in your fiction. We might touch on that later on. I think it would be really important. But I wonder if we could just start by you telling us more about how you decided to move to non-fiction. Like, was there a particular moment where you thought okay, I've got to do something that's different? Like, how did you settle on this decision to deal with the things that you talk about in After the Storm?
Do you know what? It actually wasn't a decision as such that I was very conscious of. And I think that's partly because of where my brain was at the time, which was not in the greatest place, but also because it's the worst thing that's ever happened to me, having postnatal depression. And I just felt like I had to put something out there that was me just saying, you know, I had this, and if you have it too, you're not a freak or a monster. This is quite common and awful, and we need more support. And to put it through any kind of fictional filter just it wasn't that it didn't feel right. It was like a moral thing. It just didn't feel like it was possible, I suppose. And so, and also there was part of me that was aware of the fact that I hadn't been able to find anything about postnatal depression written from a personal point of view. Lots and lots of stats. And so I just wanted to put something out there that other people could find, just like a little flag in the wilderness that other women especially, but anyone who knows anyone who's had a baby could hopefully find to help a bit, hopefully. So there was that in my mind, but more than that, I think it just felt like I just had to get rid of it in a really quick, I want to say pure, but that's a really dodgy word to use, isn't it? But it just felt like that's how. Not that it didn't have, you know, lots of problems came up when I decided to try non-fiction, and I'm not sure it's something I'm ever going to do again. But at the time, it did feel like that was the right way for me to do it, because I'd say that all of my writing is semi-autobiographical in some way, but usually I've cleared a lot of distance emotionally on what I'm writing about, which makes it easier. And then writing the fiction about it gives you even more distance, which is part of the reason and the beauty of it. But yeah, with the nonfiction, I really didn't give it much time. I was actually writing some of it while I was going through it, scraps and bits and bobs, but some of which, you know, did make it into the final book.
Yeah, it's really interesting about the distance that you mentioned there, and I think it'd be great to come back to this later on. But I think at this point it'd be lovely to hear you read some of it. So if you wouldn't mind reading a little section from After the Storm, that'd be really lovely. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks. So I'll just read the opening. It's as good a place as any. Okay, so the first little chapter is called The Cloud. It is the worst of times and the worst of times. Brighton, May 2017. I am bone tired, shoving a buggy through jostling crowds. Early summer sun beats down from a blue sky. People are eating ice creams, sitting in deck chairs, enjoying the year's first blast of warmth. But this is no ordinary Sunday on the seafront. Either side of me, 2 lines of polished parked cars, all minis, stretch forever into the distance. There are minis in every possible colour and style. Some are themed like cartoon characters or sporting heroes. Some have eyelashes. Some have stickers on the bonnet and furry seats inside. Hundreds of people walk, no amble in between, admiring the minis. The flow of the crowd is one way. I am trapped. On I trudge, trying not to run over any feet, children or dogs, trying not to make eye contact with the smiling faces, the shiny, happy people basking in the mini love. I'd set out from my flat not knowing where I was going, just needing to walk, to get out, to put one foot in front of the other, to do something that felt vaguely autonomous. These walks are the only choice I have left. I slammed the door, cursed the never-arriving lift, number 1, bane of my life, crossed the road, crossed the perilous cycle path, cursed at a cyclist, bane number 2, and turned left along the front. I stomped along the promenade, past the I-360 viewing tower, past the seafood shacks and the smokehouse, the ice cream stalls, past the pier lit up and heaving, past the crazy golf and the aquarium. Brighton is a place where people come for holidays, for hen-dos and hijinks. It's a place of merriment and celebration. I am a dark cloud over it. My partner, Ian, actually said that to me this morning. It's like living with a dark cloud. He has said kind things too. He mostly says kind things. He is a man at the end of his rope. I know that I've not been easy to live with for a while now. My mind has been steadily darkening since December, a month or so after the baby was born. I have accumulated layer upon layer of bad feeling, of negativity, rage, and doom. I'm swollen with it, waiting to explode. I think you have postnatal depression, Ian says regularly. I think you should go and talk to someone, a therapist, your GP. He's a GP 2 days a week. He's a graphic novelist and a writer the rest of the time. Even though I got him to check all of my moles the first time we were in bed together, apparently this happens to doctors a lot, I'm refusing to accept his diagnosis on this one. I don't feel depressed. I feel fucking furious. To make matters worse, in my hazy state of mind, I have inadvertently stumbled into the midst of the London to Brighton mini run, an annual get-together for mini owners. The smell of petrol hangs in the air. People have dolled up for the occasion. They smoke rollies and cheers tinnies. There is a distinct festival vibe, a cruel pastiche of my former life. I used to go to festivals. I was last woman standing at many of them, greeting the dawn with a can of lager and a grin. Now I can hardly stand up straight. I'm running on adrenaline, or rather the fumes of adrenaline. I haven't had more than 4 hours sleep in a row for 7 months. I am jumpy and twitchy like a person on high alert. I want to shout and scream and lie down and curl into a ball and have someone, anyone, just take the baby for a few hours and give me time to regroup my thoughts. I feel like I'm on the edge of a psychotic fit, some uncontrollable outburst. Ian told me he's worried I'm almost psychotic more than once. But I have no options. I feel like I should just be getting on with this. Surely not everyone can find it this hard, or humans just wouldn't do it, would they? So here I am, almost psychotic, surrounded by jolly mods and minis, my least favourite car. Ian and I have a mini. It's an old pigeon-coloured thing with one functioning door. The electrics are bust, so the windows don't open. Pieces of the upholstery and dashboard keep falling off. Ian and I argue every time we try and get in or out of it. The passenger door has been broken for 2 years, but it will cost more to get it fixed than the car is worth. Getting a baby in and out is a gymnastic feat. I often end up literally on my arse in the street, baby held aloft, bags scattered. Travelling 300 miles to see Ian's or my relatives in Manchester and Wales, respectively, is a logistical nightmare. Ian refuses to get rid of the Mini. He's had it 10 years, and I see this as him digging his heels in as some kind of eternal bachelor in denial about his new responsibilities. The Mini convention is like something sent from my subconscious to mock me, and I can't get out. It's like a bad dream. I remember those from the days when I used to sleep. People must be wondering why I'm charging ahead with such a thunderous look on my face. My phone vibrates in my pocket. I have it on silent so as not to wake the baby in the precious moments he sleeps. I miss calls, but then people are calling less. My whole life has become one of shutting down, switching off, retreating into darkness. It's a text from Ian. Where are you? I text him back. It's hard to type while walking and steering. He's worried, but I also want to vent at him. I'm the master of angry texts at the moment, especially angry nocturnal texts when he's away. How come he gets to go away? I am stuck in the middle of a mini convention. I wait a moment and then I launch my irresistible punchline, and I fucking hate minis. He doesn't rise to it, not today. I half expect him to. He'd love it here. He'd blend right in, not like me with my 3-day-old clothes and scraped up hair and foul demeanor. He texts back. I look expecting some lengthy and passionate defense of minis, but no, he says, I'm going to get on my bike and meet you at the marina. I don't reply. I don't look for him up on the cycle path, although he'll have to pass me up there where the traffic's moving freely, unlike the slow, aching meander of the mini convention. I stomp on. Everyone and everything is in my way. Sunday is in my way. Life is in my way. By the time I get to the marina, I'm a ball of rage, some kind of dying earthbound sun, a red giant on her way out. We buy burgers and sit down where it's quieter. The baby wakes and looks at me. My heart pounds in my chest, as it does in the night, as it does any time he might need me. I pull out his bottle. The baby accepts the bottle and sucks on it. The knot in my chest, the constant knot of anxiety, slackens off a little. The baby is okay. Don't panic. I begin to eat. I chomp on the burger joylessly, not tasting it, hawking and squeezing it down my throat. My love for food, like my love for most things, has mostly disappeared. I eat whole packs of biscuits mindlessly to stay awake in the afternoons. I shovel in jumbo bars of chocolate, barely chewing. Sugar is my fix, but I also sense a self-destruction in these acts beyond any previous joyous self-destruction, a self-loathing I've never known the like of before, a darkness that is opening and widening, dividing the center of me. Ian watches me eat. I shake my head and scowl. I don't want to be watched, don't want to be scrutinized. Leave me alone in my brain says it before I consciously allow it to. Misery. And there it is. Boom. I am miserable and I know it. I start to cry. Ian nods and hugs me. I think I might be depressed, I say. Yes, will you go and see someone? I'll go and see someone for a potential diagnosis, I say. His face sort of crumples, but it's all I can give him right now. I'm so ashamed. The floodgates have opened and I can't stop crying. How did this happen? I am tough. I am smart. I've built a career. I have lived alone. I've spent decades carving out a life for myself that feels right and fulfilling. And now I'm cracking right down the middle. I'll leave it there. Thanks, Johnny.
Thank you. That was really beautiful. I always think it's really lovely to hear people read. I think it sort of brings the work to life in a different way, doesn't it, in hearing it in people's voices. So I said, I think it'd be interesting to talk about distance. Before I sort of bother Emma with lots of questions of my own, I would reiterate, I think it is really important that we get a lot of questions from the audience today as well, because I'm sure yours will be much more insightful than mine. So do make use of the question functions, and I'll pick up on those as we're going through. But the distance, yeah. So the distance thing I find really interesting, because in many ways, the start of After the Storm, this moment of the mini convention, is kind of like some of the setups you use in your fiction, where we have these slightly larger than life events. So, for instance, at the end of Adults, where there's a thing with the photography session, and that slightly larger than lifeness kind of allows for some of the emotion to come through in the fiction. But here you're using it very differently, because obviously there's something much more vulnerable about this. I'm just wondering how you coped with that vulnerability, how you thought about that vulnerability when you were writing.
I think for me, this felt like a journalistic piece, and actually this did start its life. That was another thing I forgot to mention. What I just read there was part of a piece that was published in The Guardian before I got the book deal for it, before I thought, actually I want to make this into a book. Excuse me. And the response from it was another thing that just made me think, I really do have to do this just as it is, as an account from life. So I think I thought of it in that way, because I do write. I've written a lot of lifestyle journalism over the years that has been really, really personal about really, really recent things. And so I think I get around that by almost there being, well, humor is one huge way that I sort of relieve, you know, get that relief for myself and just and hopefully for the reader, but also I think just trying to think of a set piece that helps make sense of it, and that's a big part of writing anyway, isn't it? It's about like, okay, what are the things here, what are how can I take these feelings and push them towards the reader using these, you know, devices and techniques, and for me set pieces are just a hugely helpful always, and really just help me get a 360 view of what I'm saying, and allow me to do a lot in quite a short space of time, I feel. And because I think I'm someone who I never write long things anyway, all my books are really short, and so I tend to just write in quite short bursts, and so set pieces just really suit that. I get that sense of closure, almost like a little short story, I suppose, although I know that they are their own discipline. But I think with that felt to me like something that had a nice circle, and was that kind of, that was written in the May, it was about how I felt in the May. And so that was quite a, you know, then the book itself actually goes then backtracks from it, so I knew that was the setup as well. So there's always, I think even with nonfiction, obviously there's always some sense of like, right, where are your dramatic points in this story? It has to be a book, it has to be something that's going to hold attention and work in that way, and what's the arc of it. So I was aware that was for me the breakthrough point of, you know, right, okay, I'm cracking here, and this is where I admit it, and this is where, so then the book moves to show how it gets to that point, and then the kind of getting better, and the various things that I did to just help heal.
Yeah, it's interesting that you use that word breakthrough as well. I'm just thinking of that sort of ANDI anti-psychiatry thing of breakthrough rather than breakdown. I think it's really interesting that in many ways the way you write about postnatal depression is that I think one of the uses of this book, and one of the ways that you think about it in this book, is moving responsibility rather than it being like your responsibility for feeling this way. It's actually, there are much broader social patterns here that are at work in that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in every way, in terms of medicine, in terms of just friends, we always tell women to reach out and if they're not feeling good, but actually that puts so much responsibility, and you're not always in a position to do that. So I think if you know anyone who's had a baby, just do whatever you can to just check on them and just check they're okay, and that's like the tiny social part of it. People are probably doing that anyway, but then yeah, in terms of medicine, and it goes up and up and up in terms of ways that women just aren't being looked after, I don't think, at all.
But I think that's one of the things that's so wonderful about this book as well, isn't it? It's kind of breaking the taboo of asking, I think, is one thing, is that if people are familiar with this sort of narrative, then it feels okay to ask, rather than feeling like you might be, I don't know, insulting someone or putting something on them. I think it has an important role in that way as well.
And I think just trying to lose that shame, you know, that was one of the main feelings for me, was shame that I was doing a terrible job of the most important thing, you know, that I'd been given to do, which was raise a tiny human who needed me, and I thought I was doing a terrible job of that, and that was really shameful. And so that meant that I couldn't speak about exactly how I was feeling for a long time. I think we just need to really get rid of that, because I think new parents, women especially, are just overwhelmed, but we're led to believe we can do it all and have it all. That's the trick. It's like, you can do this, you can have your career, you can have a baby, you can have the social life and the healthy body, and you just can't. There aren't enough hours in the day, there's not enough money in your bank account, you just can't do it all. You just can't. So unless you've got like a team of people working for you, which all the celebs keep very quiet about, you know, but that's the only reason that I think people are able to work really hard and have tiny babies. And we just need to talk more honestly about things like childcare and about things like how hard it is. So yeah.
I mean, at what point did you feel like you could begin to write this? Like, how far away were you from the worst of it that you felt like you could actually sit down and think about it and then start to change it in a literature instead?
So I think so when I wrote that piece for The Guardian, that was it wasn't too long after the May, actually, and that felt like a nice kind of smallish way to write it, to put something down. And then I had all these like weird scraps, like almost like really like dreamy bits in notebooks that I'd written, like wrote this like really weird passage about socks that I'd just written like in the middle of it. I think I put in the book because it was just, it sort of made me laugh afterwards, but I also, you know, felt like quite sorry for myself because I was in a very strange place obsessing about socks, the baby socks and my socks and all these socks. It must have been a metaphor for something, but let's go down that road. But yeah, it was about, you know, 6 months after maybe that I just thought, this, like, I want to shape this into something that you know, that can be useful. And the other thing that I wanted to do was put some science in there, because I just love science, she says, like a pop science person. But I thought I'm going to interview some experts on things like changes in the maternal brain, because the more I sort of looked into it, I read some amazing pieces, mostly online, which I've put links to in the book, that are all about the neurological changes that happen in women's brains during pregnancy and in the postpartum period. It's amazing. Your brain completely restructures and we just don't know anything about it. We're shown diagrams when we're pregnant of women from the neck down, decapitated women, and just like, you know, vessels, and it's like, the baby's this big this week, and actually there are just as big changes, if not bigger, going on in your brain. And I think, you know, we need to talk about those and know more about those. There's a couple of really brilliant books coming out specifically on that. There's a book called The Maternal Brain, which I think is coming out next year, and then there's a book by a brilliant scientist called Dr. Jodie Paluski, who I interviewed for the book, who specializes in maternal mental health, and she was so enlightening to talk to. So it was important to me to put things like that in, so it wasn't just me, you know, talking about my life, because I felt like I wanted to offer more of a resource than that. I thought that it was good to have the personal stuff in there so that, you know, I could say I was there and it was grim, but it, you know, this is why it wasn't my fault. And but also just to have something that was a bit more objective in there too, so that it did feel like more of a resource and a bit more factual.
Yeah, I think there's I mean, there's a lot to dig into it. I think it's really interesting that balance you have that is afforded by non-fiction, because I suppose a lot of those things are things you've been doing previously in fiction as well, with the interest in science. Like, it crops up in there, doesn't it? And
it does. Yeah, it does.
It's definitely
probably
there.
More than it should.
I loved the socks, by the way. I'd happily buy a sequel that was written with that socks thing. There was something lovely and Beckettian about that. Those really terse little things about the socks are here and
yeah. No, it was, but I felt like I was living in such a surreal state, and I'm sure that's true for anyone who's sleep deprived for any reason, because it was the sleep deprivation that really got me. I think I'm convinced of it, because brains aren't meant to not have any sleep. So I'm sure that was one of the main causes for me. And you're living in such a strange dream world, I think, when you're suffering from sleep deprivation.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I think, so one of the things that I thought really interested me about that sort of the moment with the socks was wondering how much this process of going through postnatal depression changed your approach to writing anyway. Like, how much did it just change the way you shaped a sentence? How did it change the way you thought about putting words on a page?
I think in every way, the way I write has changed over the past 5 years since I've had 2 children. And that's for lots and lots of reasons. But I want to say a lot of them are to do with the children, and especially to do with the depression, and especially to do with coming out of that. As someone who'd never had any mental health illness before, it was really, really strange. And I have to say now that I feel like I'm a better writer because of how I'm stricter with how much time I'll spend on certain things, and I'm more ruthless, and I preserve myself more, and I think I probably have a bit more self-respect, and I'm a little bit tougher. And I'm not saying what doesn't kill you makes you stronger or anything like that, but I'm saying this happened to me, and these are the positives that I've taken from it. And so I think that I'm probably, I think I write better things, and I I write more, and I write more efficiently in shorter bursts of time, because that's just the nature of life with small children. But I also want to be careful about saying that having children, you know, changes you in ways that nothing else does, because I don't think that's true. And I think there are lots of big life events, and I think we really focus on children quite often, and I don't think we all should. I don't think it serves feminism particularly well to do that, and various other things. But I do think for me, definitely, I feel like I'm a more efficient writer these days, and yeah, and the only thing that I really miss, that I don't really do so much now, is when I used to go in a camper van to the Highlands of Scotland. I used to do that. That used to be my favourite way to write. I'd just go for weeks in a motorhome all around the Highlands. And it was just the best. Just used to drink whiskey and stare at locks and write. But you know what? I didn't actually get much writing done, but I got a lot of thinking done, and writing is, I think, 90% thinking, isn't it, at the end of the day? So I got a lot of thinking done. I don't have as much thinking time now, but what I do have, I really use. So yeah.
That's interesting. So do you find you're also thinking differently as well? Like, are you setting up different sort of habits and patterns around how you do that, and the way you do that?
I mean, in a way, it's almost hard to tell, because I feel like I'm still in the storm a little bit after I had my second child 10 months ago. So I feel like I'm still recovering, even though I had loads of strategies in place and things set up. I was really tactical to do my best to ensure that the postnatal depression didn't come back, and it hasn't so far, touch wood. So even though, you know, I did all of that, obviously it just takes it out of you, because they're just knackering, aren't they, babies? And so even when you've got a plan, it's like, oh, like she got hand, foot and mouth last week, and it just completely, didn't get any sleep for 3 nights. And I was like, oh, hello, 2 a.m. I remember this. So all of that just means that I'm still kind of paddling like mad underwater, I feel like, whilst working. I haven't stopped working. So it's pretty hard to tell. I think and when she's 5, I think I'll probably I'll be able to look back and go, that's how that land lies. That's what changed. That's how I did that then. That's how I did it then. And I think I need that distance that we were talking about. I feel like I just haven't got that yet. I'm still kind of, right, what needs doing this hour? Damn right, better do it. So I'm still sort of in that mode. But hopefully I'll get a bit of clarity soon.
So was that the same with your earlier works? Did you need that sort of distance coming to write about things that, I mean, it's kind of loosely biographical in some ways, aren't they? I think
it's, yeah, I always need to have a bit of that. I mean, I think I'm always interested in a central emotional dilemma, and that is always my dilemma. That's always mine. Even if it's not my present dilemma, it's a very recent one when I've started writing it. But then it takes so long for books to come out, as you know, that by the time the book comes out, so even if it feels quite raw while you're writing it, then you do an edit and it kind of all gets a bit further away, and then it goes further away again, and then it gets further away again. And then by the time it's like a smooth narrative, then it's a year till it comes out, till it's published or thereabouts. And it's like, oh, this is ancient history, you know. So I think that's why, yeah. I mean, I'd be buggered if I wrote music and it was due to come out the next week. I mean, I can't promote this. I can't talk about this. It's too close. But yeah, but literature's nice and slow.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So we've had a few questions in the chat, and this first one actually kind of touches on this. So maybe we'll come to this one now. So someone has asked, it's an anonymous attendee, so I don't know who you are, but thanks very much for the question. It seems you found writing to be a healing process for you during the experience of postnatal depression. You've spoken about encouraging people to talk about their experiences. Would you also encourage non-writers or non-experienced writers to put pen to paper in some way in order to assist the healing process?
Absolutely. I mean, I just think writing is so useful. Just putting feelings and thoughts into language just to help you understand it is so useful. And writing is just something that you can usually do quite easily and quietly on your own. There's not, you know, you can just do it just for you to see how it feels, or if you're feeling like you want to, you can show it someone else. But I just think, for me, I can't imagine life without doing that. and that's not just what I publish in books. I write all the time about everything on scraps of just got all around me all the time, just got scraps of thoughts and lines and things that just help me work out what I think about anything. And I think that's just so useful. And it is like therapy in a way, because you are verbalizing things, and that does help, even though the difference is that a good therapist will provide a more neutral space for you. And I found talking therapy is really useful too. And even though I was quite arrogant at first, and I put this in the book, and I thought, why do I need therapy? I'm a writer. I do my own therapy. I was wrong. It's very different. And there are a lot of benefits, even for a writer, to go to therapy, to talk to someone nice and objective. So yeah, but I would say yes, it's really, really useful. And I think that it's really, any kind of art really is, any way that you can express your feelings. Like if you feel like the words hurt too much, or they're not coming, then draw, paint. There's lots of more abstract ways that you can go as well, that can be really helpful, really soothing. I think it's just about soothing yourself, isn't it, however you can, and that's worth doing, and just making sense of things to yourself as well. There's an interesting scheme actually. It's at I don't know how many NHS trusts across the country are doing it, but they're doing it here in Brighton, where I live. And you can go and look through your birth notes and then take away a kind of record of the words that were written down when you were going through that delivery process. And I just feel like that is something that I might brave doing at some point. I don't know, but I just think that would be quite interesting, mainly because my voice is probably absent from those notes, which will be quite interesting in itself, to then think, right, what am I, what's my story, and how, and just to confirm to me how important it is to add that into the mix when I'm thinking about it.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, the whole language around it is huge. Also, I would say from a feminist point of view, that for me, speaking out felt so important, because there's such a deep, awful history of the oppression of women and silence, and the way they're wrapped up together and not talking about things and feeling ashamed and feeling like, we can't speak up and we have no voice. And I think that it's, for me, it felt and it feels really important to talk about this, and if you feel like you want to and you can talk about it, then do, because I think it serves us all if you feel you can do that.
Yeah. And so the writing clearly makes a difference as well, even though it's not therapy in and of itself. So it's that Samuel Johnson thing, isn't it? Like, how could I possibly know what I think about something I haven't written it down yet? That thing of writing is definitely a way of working things out. But there must have also been something really lovely in the sense of, it's not just the actual process of thinking something through. It's also that separation that comes from turning those thoughts into an artifact of sorts, whether you write it on paper or, like, it must have been a really lovely thing when it arrived at you in its finished form, to feel that kind of sense of it being past tense in some way. Absolutely.
And I think when you do start adding all the little flourishes and the things and the metaphors and all that, and you start thinking, oh yes, there's the theme, there's this, another thing about the sun, and that just means that you're pushing it away as well, and that feels really good, and that feels like a huge part of the healing process, and definitely makes it past tense. I think that's it. That's exactly how it felt as well. It's almost a little box to put it in, isn't it? Even though I'd say not in an unhealthy way. I'm not in denial about any of it, but it's definitely, I feel like I've contained what I needed to contain about what happened.
Yeah, so you've been through something and you've crafted something out of it. I think it's quite interesting you saying the in inverted commas, the literary stuff. Did that come later? Did you have, was your first draft of it, for want of a better word, was it quite raw, and then you sort of applied literary flourish to it, or was that all there at the same time?
Sort of a big old mix, really. I'd say there's a load of stuff that needed getting rid of, that wasn't working. So it was more so there'd be, I tend to overwrite and then strip back. And so there'd probably be a ton of stuff that wouldn't be working. So then it'd just be like, okay, we're going to go with this one. Or my editor would say that, and God, do I need an editor? My editor would say, there's too much, it's nonsense, it's everywhere. And then we just sort of, pare it back and focus on one. And then it's about thickening that and adding to that on later drafts. I'm a great redrafter. I redraft so many times. Like I'm probably a nightmare for editors, really, because I would just happily redraft like 20 times everything I write, because I just feel like it gets better and better the more I do that, like exponentially. And then I think there's something about sending it off that makes me realize all the things that are wrong with it. So it's something about that pressing send. I'm like, oh God, that the ending's wrong. And it's weird. It's like some kind of twisted thing in my head that I don't know really what I need to do to some parts of anything I write until I know it's too late.
Yeah,
Very
I know that feeling.
there's maybe
Yeah.
it is a thing, maybe it is a psychological thing, just the fear.
Yeah,
it sharpens you.
And that, as soon as it's finished and you start reading it out as well, and you're like, oh God, what? How did I miss that the first time round? But so we've had some more questions in the chat, and so we'll keep those coming. We'll come back to those. So the next question in the chat was something I definitely want to pick up anyway. Humor, because humor is such an important part of your work. I think it's really interesting what you're saying about therapy, in the sense that you didn't need a therapist. I think what's interesting about a lot of the ways in which you write about therapy in I suppose in some ways it starts in adults, doesn't it? But we also, I mean, more so in After the Storm, is often seems to be that experience that you go to therapists, or your protagonist goes to a therapist and they try to deploy humor, and the therapist just completely bats that down, and there is no space for humor in that environment. So I think it's really interesting that in some ways you have humor as this way of processing events, but then therapy seems to be this space that forbids that way of processing this.
That's such a good point. I'd never noticed that. Thank you, Danny. That's like really, that's really true. And I think that's because I know that and like a lot of people, it's very common, I suppose, to use humor as a defense mechanism, and actually cut the crap, in a situation like that. It's like, we get that out of the way, we're working on you. And so yeah, I think that is true. And I think because those characters at that point, there will have been an element of autobiography and there is a fair bit of that in adults. I think that is me very much acknowledging that there's no, all the smoke and mirrors have to go, and this is very much about kind of doing some work and do some proper work and knuckling down. But also I just like that play off. I love writing two-handers where there's one person really serious and one person really, really funny, and they're just like kind of clashing, and that's the kind of quite basic humor that I like to write. Just that kind of battle of opposites, I suppose, which I just have so much fun with. So yeah, I think there's probably a bit of that in there too.
Yeah, I mean, so just to follow up on that then, how did you think about like how much of your humor you could allow into After the Storm? Did you have to take some out, or was it a case of...
I was like desperately putting it in. I was like, there's got to be loads of humor in this, because I didn't want to write a depressing book about depression. I wanted to write something that was, not a lull a minute, because that wouldn't have been appropriate, but just entertaining and not bleak and human. And I suppose for me, it makes sense for me for the very darkest things and the very lightest things to be together. And I suppose even though what I write could generally be called comedy, I think there's always something really awful under the surface that's for the main characters, that is a nice balance. And I just think that that balance just feels like, I feel like you need that as a reader to persevere, but also that just feels like life. That's just life, right? It's like, you walk into a serial killer scene and there's like a magazine on the floor, and it's like, life just feels like it throws up these situations where the very, very profound, very grim, very dark, and then just the kind of weird sort of frivolous aspects of modern life, and that combination just feels so real.
Yeah, and like laughter is a survival mechanism as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's really important in that way. So I mean, kind of building on this a little bit, one of the things I think is really interesting is the kind of relationship your fiction constructs with its readers. It seems to have this sense that you are being brought in on, it's like a friend of a friend, isn't it? It's like a friend telling a story about someone else they know that you don't quite know. It's that sort of pally relationship, I think, often functions in your fiction. How much were you thinking about ways of approaching the reader, the kind of relationship you wanted with your readers in After the Storm, and did that differ to the things you were doing in fiction?
That's a really good question. I think definitely with my fiction, I like to think of it almost like I'm whispering in someone's ear, or the protagonist is whispering in someone's ear, like, come on, I'll tell you, look at this. And it's that sort of fun, secret kind of world. And I think with After the Storm, it was, I think, just seeking to be helpful. That sounds really boring, doesn't it? But just sort of saying, here's a load of stuff that you probably need to know and that no one's telling us. So I think it was a bit of rallying, a bit of come on girls, listen to this, and let's rage and help each other. So there's definitely more of that in After the Storm. But I just knew how awful I'd felt, and I just thought, if there's anyone, and I think I just wrote the book always bearing in mind that someone could be feeling that awful reading it. So it is if the other books are kind of like a whisper and fun, then this one is like an arm around, if that's not too cheesy. But it's just like kind of, come on, love, you'll be all right. This, it's gonna get better. So yeah, but I think always close up. I always like to feel really, it's always intense what I write. It's always exhausting for me as a writer, and I'm probably quite exhausting for readers, because that's just how I just like things written that are really close up. That's the kind of stuff I like to read as well. I liked lots of intimacy in the writing, lots of self-consciousness, lots of things that are just like breaking down all of the distance, as well as acknowledging that this is, a work of something.
Yeah, that's interesting. How do you cope with the exhaustion and of doing that alongside the exhaustion of raising kids? Is it just a short burst thing?
Yeah, I haven't written a novel for a long time. Yeah, the short burst thing helps. And I think adults, which I did write, that's the only novel I've written since I had a child, and that's very bitty. And I think it's bitty because it's about social media, and that felt right because of status updates and because her brain is just like firing off in so many directions. But also it was bitty just because I could sit down and write a few chunks and think, right, yes, okay, they work and this is good. So it all just worked for me as a writer, and hopefully stylistically as well. But yeah, I think that's why I'm writing TV more than anything at the moment, because that just feels like that's more doable, because it's more of a back and forth with a group of people. It's much more collaborative, and so that feel like that energy is possible, makes writing possible for me. But yeah, I've got to write another novel soon. Yeah.
So, I mean, do you feel like you miss it, or do you just feel like you're sort of compelled to write another novel?
I'm contractually compelled. But I do. Of course, I miss that lonely, solitary time to think and go deep, and like the it's that great quote. It's Jesse Armstrong, is it, who wrote Succession? He said, because I think he's written books as well as TV, and he said writing a book is like a novel, is like a slog across the Arctic, and you're just like alone, and the weather's in your face, and you might die, and you can't see anyone for miles, just like, and then writing TV is like, it's like being on tour with a band. It's like, everyone on the bus, come on, here we go. And both have their charms, and both have their joys and their cons. And but I think, yeah, I long for solitude of any kind right now, because I've got a 10-month-old baby. But I especially long to just go really, really deep in thought on a character, on a group of characters in a book. I've got a plan to do this. I have got a plan on the horizon. I've got a week near Christmas, then a week in February, where I'm just going to be on my own and go north in a van. So I'll get some clear thought then, and work on the next novel. So yeah, so I do, and I know that I'll love that time. I really will, and I'll really relish it. But yeah, you've got to juggle it all, haven't you, with whatever life is slung your way. It's never easy to find time to write, and I guess that relates to what I was saying about it's not always parenthood that makes things tricky. I think that even when I didn't have any kids, even when I didn't have any responsibilities really, other than paying my rent when I was in my early 20s, I still found myself like, I've not got any time, to write. I still made excuses. I still procrastinated. I still took years and years and years to finish anything. And I think that's just part of it. that's part of it. I interviewed a brilliant sculptor called Claire Lamb, who's from Cheshire originally but lives in Australia now, and she's had all this like amazing, she's done all these amazing sculptures about motherhood. She's phenomenal, and she said that she has accepted self-loathing as part of her process, as part of her kind of creative process that she goes round to and like dips her toe in and then comes out of. And I think the older I get and the more I write, the more I accept a lot of things as part of my creative process that maybe I didn't accept before. And I'm just like, okay, so I do that for a bit, then I do that, then I do that. And all of this is okay. And this is just what I do on the great big wheel of making things.
Yeah.
And so exhaustion is just something that I just have to kind of factor in and just say, you know, yeah, there's going to be these things that are going to change because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose in one sense that must be getting just more practical, and the sort of life circumstances make you more practical. But I suppose it probably also changes the sense of what you think an author is. You probably started when you were younger thinking the author is this magical person who has this like amazing, wonderful life and all this time to do stuff, and actually it's not the case, is it ever?
Yeah, I know. I think, yeah, it's that thing about the mystique of it all, and the kind of, you know, and actually it's the craft as much as anything, isn't it? And you've just got to sit down and do it, and you've just got to slug it out, and that's the kind of the hard work and the boring side. But yeah, I used to just think it was something that would just happen if I just wandered around enough wearing a scarf.
Yeah, the scarf does it. So your week in Scotland sounds wonderful, but also, I mean, really pressured as well.
I know,
to produce something. So I'm conscious that we've got loads of brilliant questions in the chat that are probably more interesting than anything I'll ask you. So we'll come to those now. So another anonymous question. Anonymous? Yeah, I got that right in the end. Anonymous question. So thanks very much for this, whoever you are. You talk about having a plan to avoid postnatal depression after the birth of your second child. Do you think any of these could be useful for other people? Did writing after the storm help you develop those strategies?
Yes, absolutely, and that was kind of, I wanted to offer those in the book, and I'm going to happily offer them now as well, because there were just things that for me I felt like I just wanted to put in place. One of those things was having couples therapy with my partner Ian, because we both had such different memories of the birth and the aftermath, and it nearly kind of broke us apart. And I'm happy to say it didn't, and we sort of rebuilt. We've had to rebuild our relationship. But what I wanted I booked us in for couples therapy because I just thought we just need to go through all of that together, but with someone with no agenda, who can just help us talk it all through, to check that we are as strong as we can be and both on side for this. And so that was really good for us. And actually the thing that we thought, we went in with the focus on the birth, and actually there were a whole lot of other things about communication and things like that it was just really enlightening about, and really strengthened us, I think, because I think just having that strength, that support with whoever, whether it's a partner, whether it's friends, whether it's extended family, or just make sure that those bonds and that support network are as strong as they can be when you're bringing a baby in, because it's just there's so much that you're going to have to do on your own, and it's just really important to have that. We talk so much about and someone I interviewed for the book said this, we talk so much about like having the nursery right, and having this kind of pushchair and this kind of products and this kind of blah, 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 and actually having your support network strong as you can is so crucial, just because of how knackered you're going to be, and when you're going to need social support in different ways as well. And I think so that was a big one. And then also physically, I'd got a bit older, obviously, and the birth for me was so traumatic with my son. I'm sure that was the major trigger for the postnatal depression. I think it was that the birth and then the sleep deprivation were the two main things for me. So I just thought, I'm not going through that. I had like a vaginal delivery with him, and I thought, I'm not doing that again. I'm going to ask for a C-section, which you're well within your rights to do. And I had to argue for it over and over and over again, which wasn't very nice. But I managed to get one, and that for me personally, I mean, obviously it's not something to be taken lightly. It's a major operation, and it has its own potential complications, but for me it felt less risky to do that, to know when I was going to have my baby, to minimize some of the factors that had gone awry the first time around. So So physically for me, that felt like something that I wanted to do, and and I did that, and it went relatively smoothly. And so that was a major thing. And then the other thing was for me, childcare and support. And so I was lucky enough to be able to save up money, and I saved up money to pay for a night nanny for the first few months, which was so expensive. But do you know what? It's the best money I've ever spent on anything. Honestly, it was like, I just thought, I don't want a holiday for years and years. I'd rather not have a car. I'd rather just because sleep is, I want to have another baby, but I've got to have my sleep. And so that was the third and final piece of what I put in place, really. And so I had this amazing woman who came and who lived with us in the room with the baby, and did a lot of the nights at the beginning so that I could recover and rest. Because it's the other thing that blows my mind about when you've had a baby. It's like you've just had either a major operation or been through a hugely exhausting physical thing. And then you've just got to start looking after a tiny person on no sleep. And it's like, how are you meant to do that? So those are the things that I did, and they worked for me. And I know that I was very lucky to be able to save up money to do that, but it was just a priority for me. And that's what, and I think it's about looking at ways of making that more affordable as well, and helping, if there's any way you can get extended family to do that. We didn't have, our parents are too old and they live so far away that wasn't an option. But if you've got extended family, you can just come and do a few nights and do things like that. Do that. That's or if you want to get a present for someone, get them a night. If you want to get a present for someone who's had a baby, just pay for a night nanny for a night or something, just to give them a sleep. I just think that sleep is so important. And those are the things that I did.
Great, thanks very much. So we'll keep going with the questions in the chat, because I'm conscious we're about to run out of time. Beulah Shaw's asked, did you write when you were a student in Liverpool, and has the city or your student days influenced your writing in any way?
So I did bits and bobs. I did book reviews for the big issue. I don't think I was doing tiny bits of fiction, but nothing that you could even call a short story. But I was doing book reviews, so I knew, because I thought that was a good way of sort of developing my voice and just doing something that I loved, and I got to read lots of new books for free, which was great, and got a little bit of money. It was so long ago, I think it was something like a £10 a review or something, but it was great just to get published and get your name in print. Just was such a thrill. So I did that, and the city was, it was so inspiring. I would say that the friendship that I made, particularly with my friend Alison, who I lived with and who did the same course as me, did English. We lived together and we just had a blast, and she is now still one of my best friends, and I based Animals on our friendship, really, and on what all the escapades that we got up to in Liverpool, but just the golden friendship that we built, really, and just the way that she taught me things about friendship, the way you look after friends, and the way, that I hadn't really learned before. And so all of that was against the backdrop of Liverpool. So yeah, such good memories. And we do come back for a little reunion now and then as well.
£10 a book review as well. I mean, at Liverpool at that point, that's at least one night out, if not two, isn't it?
Totally.
So a question from someone who's anonymous, but thanks very much. Thank you for helping make the subject of postnatal depression heard and something that can be talked about. Are there any other gaps in important subject matter that you feel should be addressed by writers and society more widely?
Ooh, yeah, loads. But I think mostly about there are lots and lots of brilliant books coming out about motherhood and about different ways of looking at motherhood, and I think the more the merrier. And I think I'm excited to see how we can talk about different ways of being a parent, and the different feelings that it's being aware that it's going to be really hard, and that you're never going to do a perfect job, but in the failing, the greatest gifts that you can give to your children or to your friends or the world. I think that just writing more about that spectrum of experience, more books about the spectrum of the parenting experience, is really good, and that's something I'm keen to read. And just more monstrous women as well is another one I thought of the other day. We need like more truly monstrous women in contemporary fiction, because something my characters always get accused of is not being likable. Like, oh, they're not very likable, not very likable. And I think they're too likable quite often. I think they need to be more monstrous. So more monstrous women.
Brilliant. Yeah, looking forward to that. And another question from Jules. How do you process writing about someone who may not have agency at the time of writing? For example, that your daughter may read the book when they're older. And Jules adds that I'm starting to write a memoir about growing up with an autistic sibling, and I work as a ghostwriter for many memoir clients who are often concerned about writing about family. Have you got any tips?
It's a really, really good question, and it's something that I really struggled with, because you don't want to hurt anyone. And I was just very, very aware the whole time I was writing it that my son will one day look on the internet and find this stuff, and if finds the book in the house or whatever, then he'll know that I've written this. And I suppose what I told myself and what I believe is that it isn't really about him. And it's really it's my story, and there's nothing in there that would expose him. I don't think, but what I would also say is that I want to have conversations with him about it, and I'm completely open to having conversations about it. And a friend of mine, and I put this in the book, a friend of mine called Katie said, people don't have babies, people have people. And he is a little person, and he will have his own opinion on this. And I will hear that and talk to him about it. And I'm sure I hope that I'm raising him with compassion. I hope that I'm raising him to be a feminist. I hope that he'll see the worth in what I did, putting this out there for other women, as well as it being a cathartic exercise for me. So I hope that we can just talk about all of that. And he might not approve of everything I do, and that's his right. But, we'll be two people who love each other. And I think a big part of it for me, a big part of my healing has been separating my relationship from motherhood with my relationship from my children. And my relationship with motherhood is the thing that made me a bit of a mess, because I felt like I had to do it a certain way and I wasn't doing it right. Whereas actually my relationship with my children isn't about the social role. It's about these two lovely people that I'm in love with, and it's really hard and exhausting, but it's also wonderful and growing and unknown, and we're going to grow in all these different ways together, and I can't wait for that, and they're teaching me loads. So keeping those things separate helps me sort of intellectually get around that, because that is a big emotional worry, but I think you can't be censored by it either.
Great. Yeah.
I'll say one more thing as well. Sorry, I just remembered a funny story about, so Ian, my husband, he really objected to how he was portrayed in the book. So after the first draft, he was like, because I let him read it obviously, and he was like, can we just discuss the way that I'm described in a few things? You use the word crumbled in the delivery suite. Now, I don't believe I crumbled Emma. Was I okay? Ian swashbuckled to the rescue. so having a character, even though he's a real person, giving me back chat was a new one, and not something I liked, because I was like, hey, you, get in your box. I've written this.
Yeah, it's all got a bit Flann O'Brien, hasn't it, at that point?
Yeah.
I was going to ask, actually, yeah, so well, you've already answered that question anyway. And we are just about out of time. So at this juncture, I think it would be great if we can't applaud. It seems so strange that we can't applaud, but I think wherever you are, if you'd applaud loudly or set off fireworks, whatever you've got going that would work for this. But just to say thanks very much, Emma. It's been lovely talking to you. It's been really interesting, and I'm sure everyone's got a hell of a lot out of it.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Danny, and thanks everyone for the great questions. Thanks for watching.
Thanks very much.
And thanks for uni.
Yeah, back. So thanks very much everyone for attending. I hope you've had a lovely time at this event, and you do remember that you can check out all the other ones that have happened on Facebook and through the university website. And I hope you've enjoyed this. So thanks very much, and have a lovely evening. Bye.
Bye.